If someone asked you your favorite color right now, you'd probably answer without thinking. Maybe you've had the same answer since you were 8 years old. Maybe it's changed a few times and you still feel a quiet pull toward one particular shade. It seems like such a small, meaningless preference, the kind of thing you mention in an icebreaker and forget by the next day. But here's what's strange. When researchers started looking at color preference across thousands of people, different cultures, different backgrounds, different life experiences, they kept finding the same patterns, not in the colors themselves, in the people who chose them. Your favorite color isn't random, it's a window, and most people have never looked through it. Let's start with the most common one, blue. If blue is your color, there's a good chance you're someone who values calm over chaos, not because you're boring, but because somewhere along the way you learned that peace is something worth protecting. You probably don't make decisions impulsively. You think before you speak. You replay conversations in your head, not because you're insecure, but because you care about precision. People who prefer blue tend to be deeply loyal. They don't give their trust quickly, but once they do, it's almost unconditional. That's not a social skill. That's a value system that developed early, usually in response to an environment where reliability felt rare. There's also something worth noticing here. Blue lovers are often uncomfortable with emotional volatility. They might go quiet during conflict, not because they don't have feelings, but because they learned that staying calm is the feeling they trust most. That's not distance, that's emotional architecture. Now, red is interesting. People who gravitate toward red are often described as bold, passionate, driven, and that's true on the surface, but the deeper pattern is more specific than that. Red preference tends to show up in people who have a strong relationship with urgency. They feel things quickly and intensely. They move towards stimulation rather than away from it. They're not necessarily risk takers by nature, they're sensation seekers. There's a difference. What research in chromotherapy and personality psychology suggests is that red lovers often have a high tolerance for intensity in relationships, in work, in how they experience life. They don't just want things to happen, they want to feel them happen. And here's where it gets interesting. A lot of people who love red also have a complicated relationship with stillness. Quiet makes them restless. Waiting feels uncomfortable. And that's not impatience, it's that their nervous system is wired for engagement. Stillness reads as absence. Movement reads as aliveness. Once you understand that, the boldness makes complete sense.
But the real reason color preference reveals personality isn't about the colors themselves. It's about what we reach for when no one's watching. Color preference is one of the few choices humans make that isn't heavily socialized. No one tells you to like green. No one rewards you for choosing yellow. It's one of the last purely instinctive preferences we carry into adulthood. And because of that, it reflects something pre-verbal, something that formed before you had the language to explain who you were. What you're drawn to aesthetically is often what you're drawn to emotionally, and that's where the psychology gets quiet and precise. People who prefer green tend to have a deep, almost unconscious need for balance, not perfection, balance. There's a difference. Perfection is about control, balance is about harmony. Green lovers usually have both feet on the ground even when their inner world is complex. They're often the people others describe as grounding, the ones you call when something goes wrong because they don't escalate, they stabilize. But what's rarely talked about is that green preference also correlates with a strong internal moral compass, a quiet sense of right and wrong that doesn't need external validation to function. They don't need applause to know they did the right thing, they just know. Yellow preference tends to cluster around people with highly active minds, creative, associative thinkers who make connections others miss. They often appear optimistic, but the deeper pattern is curiosity. They're not happy like lucky, they're engaged. The world genuinely interests them, and that interest reads as warmth. People who are drawn to black, and yes, it counts, often have a strong need for psychological autonomy. They're not necessarily dark or guarded, they simply resist being defined. Black contains everything and commits to nothing, and for people who feel complex on the inside, that resonates deeply. And those who prefer white or minimal, clean aesthetics often carry a craving for clarity, not emptiness, clarity. Their external environment is usually a reflection of an internal desire to think without noise. Here's what all of this points to. The colors you're drawn to aren't decorating your personality, they're reflecting it. The shades that feel like home to you, visually, emotionally, are the ones that match something internal you may have never put into words. It was never random, it was a pattern, and patterns, once seen, don't disappear, they just become visible. You start to notice them in small moments, in what you wear on hard days, in the room you feel most comfortable in the color of the mug you always reach for first. That awareness doesn't change who you are, it just makes you a quieter, more precise observer of yourself, and that alone is worth something. If this explained something about you or someone you know, there's more beneath the surface than most people take the time to look at. Understanding yourself is the beginning of everything.